Congressman Bob Goodlatte is with me. He's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and he joins us now. Good to see you, Congressman. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
So what should the U.S.'s response look like? When we hear from the president to authorize the use of military forces, what do you think that force should look like?
Well, I've believed for a long time that the current authorization for use of military force in Iraq, now more than a dozen years old, is out of date, needs to be replaced, and we should take a careful look at what the president presents to us, recognizing that it is a good thing that Jordan and some of the Gulf states and others in the Middle East are recognizing that they're on the front lines. The threat is to them, and they should step up. We should support them, and we should give the president appropriate authority to do that support. Now, one of the big questions, of course, will be what about boots on the ground? Again, we've got to be careful not to tie the president's hands, but we do not want to have major U.S. military ground forces placed back in an area where we think others should be stepping up and taking the lead. But targeted strikes and rescue missions and a whole host of other activities, spotters on the ground and so on. We need to give the president some flexibility in this area, but we need to look carefully at an appropriate authorization for use of military force.
Well, the U.S. has been carrying out airstrikes against ISIS in Syria and Iraq since August. Has it worked?
Well, I think it has definitely helped. There is no question that we've turned them back in a few places. We have seen some towns recovered by Kurdish forces and other forces in the area, but obviously more needs to be done. I think that some of the terrorist acts that they have taken place, burning Jordanian Air Force officer in a cage, may be a reflection of their desperation more than it is simply their barbarity. But either way, I think this is a long-term battle against Islamic radical terrorists, and we need to make sure that we are doing our part, because it's not just happening in the Middle East. FBI Director Comey said in Mississippi just a couple of days ago that they have active investigations of suspected ISIS collaborators in 49 states. So this is something that we can't simply allow to say it's going to happen in someplace else and we don't need to be involved in it. We do need
Congressman,
to be
we wanted to hear more about that, and I also want to ask you about the idea of cyber security and internet terrorism. So stay with the latest there. More now with Congressman Bob Goodlatte. And Congressman, you have been a leader in terms of internet and technology issues on your committee. Let me get your take on your expectations for cyber terrorism and whether or not this is an area that you think ISIS will next pursue.
Well, it's certainly something that various elements of terrorist organizations have pursued, and the United States needs to be stepping up its game. Greater cooperation between government agencies, greater cooperation between private companies and the government in making sure that cyber attacks of various kinds are repulsed. And we also need to make sure that our intelligence organizations have the ability to gather the information that they need, but not at the expense of the civil liberties of law-abiding American citizens. We passed a good bill through the Congress last year that we'll take up again this year, offered by Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, that set, I think, the right guidelines, barred the government from collection of metadata, but still gave them the opportunity to do what they need to do to gather the information to investigate terrorist plots that can take place here in the United States and elsewhere.
So, Congressman, lay out the next few days for us when the president asks Congress for the authority for more military force. How does this play out this upcoming week?
Well, we should take that and we should look at it very carefully. I don't think we need to rush into giving a very quick response. Remember, the president has had a mixed record here. He did not seek authorization for use of military force to go into Libya, and many complications have ensued from that. He then sought authorization to go into Syria against the current Syrian government. That got a very negative response from the Congress. But I think there is more open-mindedness right now about finding the right balance here in terms of giving him the authority that he needs without us stepping out in front of these Middle Eastern nations like Jordan that need to take the lead in protecting their region and in fighting ISIS. But we should be strong supporters of what they're doing.
And Jordan is one of a handful of Middle Eastern countries that have joined the fight against ISIS. Are you expecting that number to increase?
I certainly hope it will, because they clearly are the ones who are on the front lines. And this kind of radical terrorism is not what I think they want the world to see about the Middle East. There have been Muslim clerics around the world speaking out against the horrific acts taken by ISIS, and we need to get their help in pushing back on this, because this is a long-term problem with extremism trying to take hold, not just in the Middle East. We saw it in France just recently, and we've seen it in the United States before, and we'll see it again if we are not proactive in combating it.
Congressman, we'll be watching. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Maria.
We'll see you soon.